Good afternoon, class. Thank you. You can sit down. All right, then in our previous lesson, we completed the work on solving word problems involving simple equations. Before we look at the next type of equation, we will do the exercise, or we will learn how to transpose the formula first. So we'll look at transposing of formulae today. Okay, this is the plural for formula. Okay, what I will do is, again, like what I did last time, I'll go through a few examples from the exercise that's given, and then I'll give you some questions to do. But the rules that apply, the rules that apply when you are asked to solve simple equations also apply here. The first rule is you must always do the opposite operation, and whatever is done on one side of the equation must also be done on the other side. Okay, the same rules apply here. So for instance, if you were to transpose on the exercise where it says, if it says C equals pi d for d, what it means, you're supposed to transpose the formula C equals pi d for d. In other words, you have to make d the subject of the equation. Okay, let number 4 there. X is equal a over y. I have to transpose the equation to make y the subject. Okay, any idea on what we should do? Kyle, I want to make y the subject of this equation. The first step is
multiply y on both sides.
okay, multiply y on both sides of the equation. All right, so I'm going to get xy equals a. Next step, tau. I want y to be the subject of the equation.
Divide x on both sides.
Okay, divide x on both sides, which means y will be equal to a over x. Okay, we go to number 9. The formula is n equals p plus cr. It says we have to transpose for r. Patrick, I want you to tell me the first step I should take so that I can make r the subject of the equation.
Divide C on both sides.
Are you sure?
N minus P.
Okay, I have to subtract p first. I can't divide, because if I do, I'm going to get c. Divide by c, divide by cn, divide by c. I will not have r. I will have p over c plus r on this side. I want r to be by itself on one side of the equation. So the first thing I need to do is to subtract p. So n minus p will be equal to c multiplied by r. Livingston, now I want r.
Divide C on both sides.
Okay, divide c on both sides. So n minus p over c will be equal to r. Number 12. Number 12 is v equals 2r over capital letter R minus R. I want to transpose this formula for small letter r. Garonamo, what is the first step I should take?
Multiply r minus r on both sides.
Okay, I have to multiply capital letter R minus small letter r on both sides of the equation. So V multiplied by R minus R equals 2R. May I ask you to stand up, please, when you answer the question? Okay. Next step, Raylene.
Divide by r.
Which R? Small letter R or big letter R?
Big R.
Okay, remember I want small letter r. So if I divide by big letter R, this is what I'm going to get. I'm going to get V multiplied by R minus small letter r over big letter R equals 2. Agnes, do you think that's the correct step to take?
No. No.
No, okay, you tell me what I should do.
Divide by v and big R.
Divide by?
V and capital R.
At the same time? You are telling me to divide by V and capital letter R. My mic is falling. Formulae, what do you think?
You multiply VR.
Which VR?
Capital V and capital R by capital R and 2.
Here?
You remove the brackets and then you multiply.
Okay, that's better. Remove the brackets. V multiplied by R minus V multiplied by small letter r equals 2R. Remember, I want small letter r to be on one side of the equation because I have to make that a subject. Gabriel, next step.
Add VR on both sides.
Which one? Small one? This one
Yeah,
here?
yeah, the smaller.
Okay. VR equals, he's saying I have to add this on both sides. So if I add it here, it will disappear. I have to add it on to the other side. So 2R plus V times small letter r. Peter, what's next? Please.
Subtract 2r on both sides.
Okay, good. VR minus 2R equals V times small letter r. Andrew?
Divide by V on both sides.
Okay, very good. So R is equal to VR minus 2R divided by V. I have now made R the subject of the equation. Okay, I want you to do number 15 quickly. Okay. Number 15. You will note that the formula for number 15 is exactly the same as the one for number 12. Except that for number 12, you are asked to make small letter r the subject of the equation. Whereas for number 15, you are asked to make big letter r the subject of the equation. So I'm going to take, the steps are exactly the same, except I'm going to take it from here. Okay, from this point. So maybe I'll start from the beginning. V equals 2r over big letter R minus small letter r, and then VR equals, VR minus V times small letter r. That means I'm multiplying by r minus r equals 2r. And then I'll add and subtract. So VR minus 2r equals VR. Now the rule is also that you cannot have, like from here, you cannot divide by 2 and divide by 2 and have, although you have one r here, there's another one here. You cannot have that. You must have only one r, and it has to be on one side of the equation. Okay, from this point, what can I do to have only one r? What can I do so that I have one r only and not two separate ones? We say it loud so everyone can hear.
Factorize.
Factorize. A common factor is r. I have v minus 2 equals VR. Now I can divide by v minus 2. So r equals VR over v minus 2. Now I have only one r, one capital letter R. There is no other capital letter R. So this is the formula for R. Okay, next one you are going to do number 19. it's okay. Yeah, that one is all right. This one is also okay. That's because he subtracted. Yeah, both answers are. Where's yours? Okay. Minus 2. Yep. Both answers are okay. All right, number 19 is K equals 3n plus 2 over n plus 1. Solomon, can you please tell us what the first step is? First step.
You multiply n plus 1 on both sides.
Okay, multiply n plus 1 on both sides. I'm going to have k times n plus 1 equals 3n plus 2, which is kn plus k equals 3n plus 2. George, what next?
Minus kn on both sides.
So k equals 3n minus kn. And then next one, should I subtract 2?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just subtract it. K minus 2. Remember I said that you can actually do two things at the same time. So you can subtract kn on both sides and subtract 2 on both sides. Let's just move from one side to the other with the opposite sign. Okay, now I have to factorize this. N times 3 minus k equals k minus 2. And so n is equal to k minus 2 over 3 minus k. Does everyone have that answer? Yes? Hands up those who have a different answer, slightly different one. Boromir, what's yours? Okay. The other way around is also correct. N will be equal to 2 minus k over k minus 3. That is if from here you subtract 3n and subtract k. It's also correct. So you will have both answers. Okay, you have to do 22 now. You get the same answer. Okay, if you put 2 here, sorry, 2 is going to give 0. Let's say 5. 5 minus 2 is 3. 3 minus 5 is negative 2. So you are going to get negative 3 on 2. Negative 1 and a half. Okay, if it's the other way around. 2 minus 5 will be negative 3. And 5 minus 3 will be 2. It will still be negative 1 and a half. Because when you divide by a negative number, you get negative, and when you divide a negative by a positive, you get the same answer. So It's all right. You will still get the same. 4 times 4 is negative 1, so you'll get negative 2. 2 over negative 1 is negative 2. Okay, the other way around. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. Okay, you got it? 4 minus 3 is 1. Oh. What's the opposite of square root? Square. So square this side. When you do it, just removes this one, but you will have squared both sides. How did you remove the square root sign? What's the opposite of square root? Square. So you square both sides. So you remove the square root sign. So this one should be this squared over this square. Oops. Where did the square root sign go? What's the opposite of square root? Square. So you square both sides to remove the square root sign, and then you have to square this side. Opposite of square root is square. So square both sides. Square this side, it will get rid of the square root sign. You have to get rid of the square root sign first. How do you do that? Square both sides. So when you square this side, all you're doing, like for instance, if you square root 2, remember the answer will be what is inside 2, because it's root 2 times root 2. When you do that, 2 times 2 is 4, square root of 4 is 2. So you do exactly the same. If you square that, all it does is it will get rid of the square root sign. That's how I say it. And you will have only this one. But remember, you have to square the other side as well. No, this is square root already. You can find the square root again. Opposite of square root is? What's the opposite of square root? Square. So instead of that sign, you square. D squared over D squared. What does it say for F? And then you're supposed to multiply F minus P. But then there's another F on the other side. You have to multiply, and then you have to multiply by F minus P. You're going to bring this F also to to one side. This F and this one. Yeah, you will have to bring this F. Like if you're, now this is the second step. That means you squared both sides. Now the third step is to multiply by F minus D. So you will get D squared over D squared multiplied by F minus D. F minus P. Remember there's a D squared here. Here, there's going to be a D squared. You also have to multiply by that to bring it to this side. Then there'll be an F here and an F here. You have to bring both of them to one side only, like we did. Okay, then what? What's the next one? You want F to be on one side of the equation. Okay. Write this one as D squared over small letter D squared first. And then you multiply. You multiply that and multiply this D squared. Cross multiply. Yeah, that's okay. And then there's an F here and an F there. You have to subtract and then remove this one to the other side. And then factorize. Are we finished yet? Okay, Daniel, what is the opposite of the square root of?
Square.
Okay, the square root of the opposite of square root is squaring. Okay, so f plus, what is it? P over f minus p. Okay, we want f to be the subject of the equation. So I'll just explain why when you square this side, it will get rid of the square root sign. If you had, remember I said when we were looking at basic numeracy, if you square the square root of 2, what is your answer? 2. It's the number inside the square root sign. So squaring it is like removing the square root sign. Otherwise, it's because of this. Root 2 times root 2 will be equal to the square root of 4, which is 2. So when you square this side, you get rid of the square root sign. So we now have d squared, because we are squaring both sides. D squared over small letter d squared equals f plus p over f minus p. Next step is to multiply f minus p on both sides and also d squared. In other words, you can actually cross multiply. So the next step is to do that. D squared multiplied by f minus p equals small letter d squared multiplied by f plus p. Then we have to expand, because we have to move the f's to one side of the equation because we want to end up with one f only. So d squared f plus d squared p equals small letter d squared f plus small letter d squared p. Oh, this one should be minus. Okay, what's the next step then? What's the next step, Rita? Have a look at what I've got on the board, or if you've done it. What should I do next?
Minus df d squared f, small letter d squared f on the other side, and plus capital letter d squared f p.
P, okay, so d squared f minus small letter d squared f equals d squared p plus big letter d squared p. Then I have to factorize. So f multiplied by d squared minus small letter d squared equals d squared p plus big letter d squared p. Then I divide to get f. F is equal to d squared p plus big letter d squared p over d squared minus d squared. Okay, you will do the rest of the questions for homework. No worries, you'll find time. Like while you are watching rugby. On a Friday, when it's advertisement time, you sit down with your maths homework instead of watching all the advertisements too. Okay, all the questions apart from the ones that we have done. We've done 5. So you have 15 left. Okay, I'll have to let you go to your next lesson. The keyword to the pilot teacher is transposing. So good afternoon, class.